The cold blue glow of the starfield outside the observation windows stretched out endlessly as Sergeant Jack Turner leaned back against a bulkhead, watching the final checks being performed on the Horizon's landing shuttle. The hum of activity filled the hangar. Engineers running diagnostics, technicians exchanging short, clipped instructions, and pilots gearing up for the historic meeting about to take place. Jack adjusted the strap of his sidearm, feeling its weight hang heavier than usual. Not that he expected trouble, but the prospect of walking onto a completely alien world, meeting beings no human had ever met before, brought a peculiar tension to his stomach. "Hey Jack, you ever think you'd see the day?" asked Lieutenant Aaron Briggs, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a calm, steady demeanor. Aaron was standing next to him, helmet tucked under one arm, a faint grin pulling at his lips. Jack shook his head, chuckling. "Not a chance. I mean, I signed up to keep Earth's colonies in line, not to shake hands with aliens." "Well," Aaron said, his grin widening, "better practice that handshake. I hear they have 3 fingers. Don't go grabbing something you're not supposed to." "That'll be your job, Briggs," Jack shot back, smirking. He felt a little of the nervous edge fade at the banter. "But seriously, this is going to be different." "No kidding," Aaron replied. He looked out at the shuttle, then around the hangar. "I heard the Illyrians have never had direct contact with another species. Not like this. We'll be the first." "Yeah, no pressure," Jack muttered, tightening his gloves. "You meet any diplomats from Earth, you'd think we've done this 100 times. They act so sure of themselves. That's their job, Turner. Ours is to keep things running smooth." Jack nodded. He and Aaron had been serving together for years, through assignments that had been routine, uneventful, and occasionally perilous. Aaron had a knack for reading the situation, for staying level-headed even when things got hairy. Jack valued that, especially now, on the edge of something so profoundly unknown. The shuttle doors hissed open, and Commander Elena Marks stepped out, her crisp uniform immaculate, her expression all business. "Sergeant Turner, Lieutenant Briggs," she said, nodding to each of them. "Final boarding in 5 minutes. Get yourselves ready." "Yes, ma'am," they answered in unison. "Remember," Mark said, her gaze flicking between them, "we're here to make friends, to show them we're not a threat. So no sudden moves, no hostile gestures. Follow the lead of the diplomats and keep your comms open." Jack and Aaron exchanged glances as Marks walked off. "Well, at least she didn't say, 'Try not to screw this up,'" Aaron said dryly. Jack laughed. "Give her time. She might come back." The shuttle ride down to the Illyrian homeworld was surprisingly smooth. Jack and Aaron sat near the rear, checking their gear one last time, though they knew they'd likely never need it. Across from them, the official diplomatic team, Ambassador Mitchell and her staff, were already rehearsing their opening lines, practicing greetings in the alien tongue. "You think they'll be as nervous as we are?" Aaron asked quietly. "If they are, they hide it better," Jack replied. "I mean, they're diplomats. Talking is their job. Still, think about it. Their first visitors from the stars are a bunch of humans. For all they know, we're loud, violent, and trigger-happy. Can you imagine what they're thinking?" Jack shrugged. "Hopefully they're thinking we can work together. I just hope they don't take one look at us and change their minds." When the shuttle finally landed, the ramp lowered into a blindingly bright landscape. Jack's helmet visor adjusted instantly, revealing a lush, green world beneath a golden sky. Alien architecture rose in graceful, spiraling forms, blending seamlessly into the landscape. The air, though faintly humid, was breathable. The Illyrians had provided detailed environmental data weeks earlier, but experiencing it firsthand was something else entirely. They stepped out onto the platform, Aaron just a step behind Jack. A small delegation of Illyrians stood waiting. Their lithe figures were draped in flowing garments that shimmered with soft iridescence. They had long, elegant features, tall frames, pale, opalescent skin, and striking luminous eyes that seemed to glow faintly under the alien sun. The delegation moved forward in unison, each step graceful and deliberate. "Ambassador Mitchell, I presume?" one of the Illyrians said, their voice melodic yet firm. Their words were slightly accented, but perfectly understandable, thanks to the linguistic exchange programs that had been running for months. "Yes," Mitchell said, stepping forward with a practiced smile. "It's an honor to meet you. We come as friends, seeking to learn and share with your people." Aaron leaned closer to Jack and whispered, "They don't look so bad. Kind of ethereal, really." "Yeah," Jack whispered back. "But let's not assume anything. Still got a long way to go before we know what's what." As the initial pleasantries unfolded, Jack and Aaron hung back, observing. The Illyrians moved with a precision that spoke of deep cultural tradition. Yet their faces were not cold or unfeeling. There was curiosity there, perhaps even a touch of warmth, especially in the way one of them, taller than the rest, with a crown of delicate crystalline growths, focused on Jack. When their eyes met, Jack felt a jolt of unease, as though he was being studied more closely than he had anticipated. "Sergeant Turner," Mitchell called out. "Come here a moment." Jack stepped forward, aware of Aaron just behind him. The tall Illyrian, now standing directly in front of him, extended a hand. Jack hesitated for a heartbeat before taking it, his calloused palm meeting the smooth, cool touch of the alien's fingers. "I am Lithia," the Illyrian said. "It is good to meet you, Jack Turner." Her voice was calm, measured, yet there was an undertone he couldn't quite place. Jack nodded. "It's good to meet you, too." From the corner of his eye, he saw Aaron give him a subtle thumbs up. For once, Jack wasn't sure if it was a gesture of encouragement or sympathy. Chapter 2. The Declaration. The Illyrian Hall was a sweeping masterpiece of alien architecture, every surface adorned with luminescent patterns that pulsed faintly, as if in rhythm with the beating heart of the planet itself. Jack and Aaron found themselves near the back of the gathering, standing side by side with other human delegates. The sheer scale of the assembly was intimidating, rows upon rows of Illyrian dignitaries and officials arranged with perfect symmetry, their alien features glowing faintly in the golden light. "Quite the turnout," Aaron murmured, glancing around. "No kidding," Jack replied, his voice low. "I feel like a grain of sand on a very shiny beach." The Illyrian Empress, Lithia, stood at the center of the stage, her crystalline crown refracting the light into delicate rainbows. Her presence was magnetic, commanding without appearing forceful. She raised her hand, and the hall fell silent. An eerie, absolute silence that made Jack's ears ring for a second. Every eye was on her. "We gather here," Lithia began, her voice resonating, "not just to welcome new friends, but to chart a course together. The arrival of humanity is a moment that changes us all." Jack exchanged a glance with Aaron. "She's got a way with words," Aaron said, tilting his head. "I'll say," Jack replied, folding his arms across his chest. "Let's just hope that course she's talking about doesn't take a wrong turn." As Lithia spoke of peace, of learning, of unity between their peoples, Jack felt himself relaxing slightly. Perhaps this really was the start of something good. But then, just as he began to let his guard down, she shifted her focus and her tone. "The path forward requires trust and guidance," Lithia said, her gaze sweeping the assembly before locking onto Jack. "And I have found that guidance." Jack blinked, feeling a sudden unease. "She's looking at me?" he muttered under his breath. Aaron frowned. "Are you sure? There's a lot of people here." "No, she's definitely looking at me." Lithia extended her hand toward Jack, her voice steady. "Sergeant Jack Turner of Earth. You are the one I have chosen." The room seemed to hold its breath. Jack's stomach dropped. "Wait, what?" he whispered, feeling every pair of eyes in the room turn to him. Aaron's hand clapped onto Jack's shoulder, his voice dry but low enough for only Jack to hear. "Looks like you just got promoted to alien royalty." "Not funny, Briggs," Jack muttered back, his heart pounding. He stepped forward slightly, uncertain of what to say. Your Majesty, Empress, I think there's been a misunderstanding." Lithia tilted her head slightly, her expression serene. "No misunderstanding, Sergeant. The stars themselves have confirmed it. Our union is not only a symbol of our worlds coming together, but a necessary step for the harmony of both our peoples. I don't think I understand, Jack said, trying to keep his tone even. His voice felt small against the sheer gravity of the moment. Union? She's talking about marriage? Aaron muttered, barely containing a smirk. Jack shot him a look before returning his attention to Lithia. Empress Lithia, with all due respect, I'm just a soldier. I'm here to support the mission. I'm not someone who makes these kinds of decisions. That is precisely why you are chosen, Lithia said, her calm voice carrying easily through the hushed hall. You are a representative of Earth's courage, and your character speaks louder than any rank or title. Your presence here fulfills the prophecy written in our oldest histories. Aaron leaned in, barely moving his lips. Congratulations, you're now part of an ancient prophecy. Didn't see that one coming, did you? Jack exhaled sharply, ignoring his friend's attempts at humor. I appreciate the honor, but this is something I can't accept without. He hesitated, searching for the right words. Without a clearer understanding of what's being asked, Lithia stepped forward, her crystalline crown catching the light. I am not asking, Sergeant Turner. I am declaring. You are my chosen mate, the one destined to walk beside me in this new era. Jack's mind raced. He was a soldier, not a politician or diplomat. He wasn't trained for this. As he stood there, struggling to find a response, Aaron spoke up quietly beside him. If I were you, Aaron said, I'd suggest a polite way to slow this down. Something like, can we discuss this further? Jack glanced at his friend and gave a barely perceptible nod. Then he turned back to Lithia. Empress, perhaps it would be best if we could speak more privately about this declaration. There are many things I need to understand before I can fully respond. Lithia's expression remained serene. As you wish, Sergeant. We shall speak in private. For now, know that my declaration stands. With that, she turned back to the assembly and resumed her address, leaving Jack and Aaron to retreat to their places. Aaron leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. Well, Jack, you wanted to make history. Looks like you just did. Jack groaned. This is not what I signed up for. Chapter 3, Learning Curves. Jack leaned back against the smooth surface of the ornate chair, shifting uncomfortably. The room he sat in was more lavish than anything he'd ever seen. Graceful arches swept overhead, and golden light from crystalline sconces cast soft, warm patterns on the polished walls. In front of him was a low, silver-topped table, where an array of glowing symbols danced in the air. They were some kind of Illyrian text, but the flowing shapes were as alien to Jack as the world outside the palace walls. All right, Turner, just keep it simple, Aaron Briggs muttered, seated beside him. The lieutenant's shoulders were relaxed, but his voice carried an edge of caution. Let them do most of the talking. Jack shot him a sidelong glance. Simple? You mean like when the Empress declared me her mate in front of the entire planet? Aaron shrugged. She's got style, I'll give her that. You just have to roll with it. Before Jack could respond, a door behind them hissed open, and two Illyrian advisors entered, their long robes gliding soundlessly across the floor. One was a male with slate-gray skin that gleamed like polished stone, his gaze calm but piercing. The other was female, her delicate features framed by intricate silver patterns that seemed to flow under her skin. Both carried a collection of scroll-like devices, the glowing symbols on their surfaces shifting as they approached. The male advisor spoke first, his voice melodic yet deliberate. Sergeant Jack Turner, Lieutenant Aaron Briggs. Welcome to the Royal Council's private chambers. Aaron stood, offering a polite bow that Jack mirrored. Thank you, Aaron said smoothly. We're honored to be here. Jack remained silent, trying to follow Aaron's lead. He wasn't used to this kind of formal interaction, especially not when the people in front of him weren't even human. The female advisor stepped forward, her tone softer but equally authoritative. We have much to teach you, and much to learn from you. Empress Lithia has decreed that you will be educated in our ways, so that your union may be harmonious and fruitful. Jack raised a hand. Sorry to interrupt, but I think there's still a misunderstanding. I didn't agree to. Aaron nudged him sharply. What he means is, we're eager to understand more, Aaron said quickly, his voice smooth. There's just a lot to take in, you know? The advisors exchanged a glance. Then the male nodded. It is natural to feel overwhelmed, but your place in this is assured. Let us begin. What followed was a whirlwind of lessons that left Jack's head spinning. The Illyrians demonstrated their language through projected holograms, their spoken words and written forms flowing in harmony. They showed him ancient rituals and explained the significance of various gestures and phrases. Jack struggled to keep up, tripping over words that sounded more like melodies than language, and often looking to Aaron for help. Come on, Turner, Aaron said with a faint grin. You've handled worse. Remember that time on New Argus when you had to explain Earth humor to those Ralithan traders? That wasn't so bad, Jack said, fumbling with the pronunciation of an Illyrian phrase. They actually laughed. Yeah. After you tripped over a barrel of their sacred fruit and fell on your... All right, I get it, Jack cut in, rolling his eyes. He turned back to the advisors who watched patiently. What's the word for help again? The female advisor repeated the word slowly, her voice carrying a gentle lilt. Jack tried again, earning a nod of approval. See? You're getting it, Aaron said. One awkward phrase at a time. Jack exhaled. I still don't see how all this connects back to me being, chosen. What's so special about me? Anyway, the male advisor tilted his head. It is not what is special about you. It is what you represent. A meeting of worlds, of perspectives. Empress Lithia has seen in you the qualities needed to bridge these differences. Jack ran a hand through his hair, unsure what to say. He wasn't sure he wanted to be anyone's bridge or symbol. He'd spent his career being a soldier, doing his job and keeping his head down. Now he was expected to learn a language, adapt to customs he didn't understand, and somehow be a mate to an alien empress? Aaron patted him on the shoulder. Cheer up, Turner. At least the food here isn't half bad. And you're making progress. Slow, awkward progress, but progress. Jack couldn't help but chuckle at that. Yeah. Thanks for the vote of confidence. The lessons continued into the evening. By the time they were finished, Jack felt more drained than he ever had after a combat training session. But he also felt a small flicker of hope. He was far from fluent, far from understanding the intricacies of Illyrian culture. But he'd survived his first day of lessons without making a complete fool of himself. And that, in his book, was a step forward. Chapter 4. Cultural Exchange. Jack adjusted the collar of his borrowed Illyrian robe, fidgeting as the stiff fabric brushed against his neck. He and Aaron had been invited, well commanded, to attend one of the palace's renowned cultural exhibitions. The vast chamber buzzed with activity, filled with Illyrian artisans, performers, and dignitaries. Jack wasn't exactly thrilled to be there, but Aaron seemed relaxed, even intrigued. Don't look so tense, Turner, Aaron said, leaning in. This might actually be fun. Beats sitting through another language lesson. Doesn't it? Jack shrugged. I don't know. I feel like I'm one wrong move away from insulting someone's ancestors. You're overthinking it, Aaron said, clapping him on the shoulder. Just follow my lead. That's what I'm afraid of, Jack muttered. An Illyrian attendant approached, bowing slightly. Sergeant Turner, Lieutenant Briggs, he said in fluent, if accented, English. The Empress wishes for you to accompany her to the central pavilion. Jack exchanged a look with Aaron, who raised an eyebrow. Guess we're the guests of honor, Aaron said, grinning. Lead the way. They followed the attendant through the crowd, Jack feeling the weight of countless eyes on him. At the center of the hall, Lithia stood beside a towering crystalline sculpture. The structure seemed to shift and shimmer, as if it were alive, its surfaces reflecting countless colors. Lithia turned as they approached, her calm, regal demeanor unchanged. Sergeant Turner, she said, her voice carrying easily over the noise of the crowd. Lieutenant Briggs, I am pleased you could join us. Thank you for inviting us, Aaron replied smoothly, bowing slightly. Jack mirrored the gesture, though it felt awkward. Lithia gestured toward the sculpture. This is the real thing. An ancient piece created by our finest artisans long ago. Its shape shifts to reflect the emotions of those nearby. Jack tilted his head, watching as the crystalline surfaces shifted to deeper hues of blue. So it's like an emotional mood ring? Lithia's expression remained serene, though there was a flicker of curiosity in her gaze. A simplistic comparison, perhaps. But yes, you could say it reflects our collective mood. Aaron leaned closer to Jack. Looks like it doesn't know what to make of us. Jack stifled a laugh. Yeah, I guess we're an emotional wild card. Lithia's head tilted slightly. Do humans not create art that responds to emotion? Well, we have music that can make you feel a certain way, Aaron offered. Or paintings that evoke memories and emotions. But nothing that reacts like this. Interesting, Lithia said, her eyes briefly meeting Jack's. I would be curious to see such human art. Aaron gave Jack a sly grin. Jack here is a master of stick figure drawing. I'm sure he'd be happy to share his work. Jack groaned. Please ignore him, Empress. My art would probably just confuse your real thing. Lithia's lips curved into what might have been the faintest hint of a smile. Humor is an art form in itself, is it not? Aaron laughed. See? She gets it. Jack felt his initial tension easing. The conversation, though formal at times, had a natural flow. He began to understand that Lithia wasn't just a ruler. She was curious, open. Ed in with comparisons to Earth traditions, making the conversation lively. Jack found himself drawn into the exchange, occasionally offering his own thoughts. When they came to a table displaying intricate, glowing weavings, Jack couldn't help but reach out. These are incredible, he said, running his fingers lightly over the cool, smooth threads. How do you get them to glow like that? It is a process passed down through generations, Lithia explained. The threads are infused with a rare mineral that emits light when woven in a specific pattern. Pretty advanced for something that's just for decoration, Aaron remarked. It is more than decoration, Lithia said. Each weaving tells a story, a history. To the trained eye, it is a record of our people's journey. Jack nodded, his gaze lingering on the patterns. Sounds like something you'd want to keep safe. Yes, Lithia said. These weavings are treasured. They connect us to our past and remind us of our shared path. Aaron glanced at Jack. What do you think, Turner? Wouldn't mind one of these hanging in your apartment back home? Jack chuckled. If I had an apartment back home, maybe. Lithia turned to Jack. Perhaps one day you will. The evening wore on, filled with laughter, thoughtful exchanges, and the occasional awkward moment when Jack or Aaron mispronounced an Illyrian term. But by the time they returned to their quarters, Jack felt something he hadn't expected. A genuine appreciation for the Illyrians' culture and a growing respect for Lithia herself. Aaron clapped him on the back. See? Told you it'd be fun. Jack smiled faintly. Yeah, it wasn't so bad. Chapter 5, Whispers of Dissent. Aaron frowned as they walked down the grand corridor toward the council chambers. I'm telling you, something feels off. The whole room went dead quiet the moment they mentioned the exchange program. Jack shrugged. Maybe it's just nerves. Not everyone's on board with shaking hands and trading recipes. Sure, Aaron said, glancing over his shoulder. But that was more than nerves. You didn't catch the looks on their faces. I saw, Jack admitted. The old guard types didn't seem too happy. But what can we do about it? We're not the ones making the decisions. No, but we're caught in the middle of it, Aaron said. That puts us in the perfect spot to see when someone's about to throw a wrench into the works. Jack stopped and turned to him. All right, what are you thinking? Aaron lowered his voice. I think we need to keep our ears open. If someone's planning to screw things up, they're gonna slip up eventually. When they do, we need to be ready. I thought we were supposed to be the friendly faces, Jack said. Not exactly our job to play detective. Sure, Aaron said with a faint grin. But when has that ever stopped us? They reached the chamber doors and stepped inside. The council members were already seated, their expressions guarded. Lithia sat at the head of the table, her usual serene calm intact, though Jack thought he caught a flicker of tension in her gaze. As the meeting began, Jack and Aaron took their places along the wall, their presence more ceremonial than functional. They listened as the Illyrian officials debated the logistics of the exchange program, which would bring human advisors and experts to work alongside Illyrian counterparts. On the surface, it sounded like a great idea, but as the discussion wore on, the undercurrent of unease grew stronger. One of the counselors, an elder with sharp features and a voice like cracked ice, stood. "Empress, I must express my concern. This program risks diluting our culture. Our traditions are delicate, carefully maintained. Inviting so many outsiders. Are we not all outsiders at first?" Lithia said, her tone gentle but firm. "When we encounter the unknown, do we not grow stronger by understanding it?" "Perhaps," the counselor replied. "But there is a difference between understanding and integration. Once our ways are altered, they cannot be restored." Another counselor, a younger one with a more open expression, spoke up. "Is it not possible to integrate without losing what makes us unique? Humanity is not a threat, but an opportunity. Their knowledge, their experience, can enrich us." Jack leaned toward Aaron. "See? Not everyone's against it." "Yeah," Aaron whispered back. "But I'd bet you 5 credits that Icy Guy has more friends in this room than the younger one does." Jack sighed quietly. The discussion continued, back and forth, until it was clear no consensus would be reached that day. The Empress adjourned the meeting, and the counselors filtered out in small groups, their conversations hushed but animated. Jack and Aaron lingered near the door, keeping a watchful eye on the counselors as they left. Aaron nodded toward one of them, an older man with deep green skin and a shrewd expression, who paused to speak with a few others before slipping out a side exit. "That one," Aaron said quietly. "He's been throwing subtle barbs all day. Keep an eye on him." "What's the plan if he's up to something?" Jack asked. "We don't jump to conclusions," Aaron said. "We just watch, listen. If he makes a move, we report it." Jack nodded. "And if it's nothing? Then we wasted a little time being cautious," Aaron said. "Better than ignoring it and finding out too late." Later, as they walked back to their quarters, Jack shook his head. "This isn't what I signed up for." Aaron smirked. "You say that a lot." "Because it keeps being true," Jack said. "But fine. We'll watch, we'll listen. I just hope we're wrong." Aaron clapped him on the shoulder. "Me too. But we've seen how quickly things can go sideways. Best to be ready." Jack didn't disagree. The unity they were working toward was fragile, and not everyone wanted it to succeed. If keeping an eye on the dissenters could help keep the peace, he was willing to do it. But that didn't mean he had to like it. Chapter 6. The Festival of Stars. The Illyrian city glowed with a vibrant, golden light as its inhabitants gathered for the Festival of Stars. It was an event Jack had heard mentioned only briefly before today, and now that he was in the middle of it, he couldn't help but be awed by the sheer magnitude of the celebration. Enormous, glowing tapestries draped every building, and the streets buzzed with music, laughter, and the hum of unfamiliar instruments. Aaron nudged him. "This is something else, huh?" Jack nodded. "Yeah, it's like New Year's Eve on every colony world at once. Except quieter. More, I don't know, elegant," Aaron suggested. "Yeah, that's it," Jack said. "Elegant. Makes me feel a little underdressed." "Relax," Aaron said. "Nobody's looking at us. They're here for the stars." Jack glanced up, his breath catching. The night sky was alive with streaks of light, cascading across the heavens in shimmering bands of silver and gold. The display wasn't natural. It was created by the Illyrians' unique technology, but that didn't make it any less stunning. The stars seemed close enough to touch, like a sea of jewels scattered just beyond reach. Lithia's voice broke through his thoughts. "Sergeant Turner, Lieutenant Briggs." Both men turned, finding the Empress standing just a few feet away. Her robes were adorned with subtle, shifting patterns that mirrored the stars above. She moved with her usual calm grace, but tonight there was something different. A faint smile that softened her otherwise regal bearing. "Empress," Aaron said, bowing slightly. Jack followed suit. "Please," Lithia said. "No need for formality. Tonight is a celebration. You are our guests and our friends." Aaron grinned. "In that case, I'll skip the full bow. I'd probably pull something." Jack gave him a sharp look. "Aaron." "What?" Aaron said, his grin widening. "She said no need for formality." Lithia's smile grew more pronounced. "I appreciate the spirit, Lieutenant. And you, Sergeant, are as serious as ever. It is admirable." Jack cleared his throat, feeling slightly awkward. "Just doing my best not to cause offense, Your Majesty." "Lithia," she corrected gently. "At least for tonight." The three of them stood together, watching as the festival unfolded. Performers wove through the streets, their movements fluid and mesmerizing. Vendors offered delicacies Jack couldn't begin to name, their stalls lit by soft, glowing lanterns. Aaron wandered a few paces ahead, stopping at a vendor to examine a tray of crystalline confections. Jack and Lithia remained side by side, the atmosphere strangely peaceful. She tilted her head slightly, studying the crowd. "What do you see, Sergeant?" Jack hesitated. "I see a people who know how to celebrate, who value their traditions." She nodded. "It is a night of remembrance. Each streak of light represents a moment from our history. Triumphs, losses, discoveries, all woven together in the sky." "It's incredible," Jack said honestly. "I've never seen anything like it." Lithia turned her gaze to him, her luminous eyes thoughtful. "And you? How would your people celebrate such an occasion?" Jack shrugged. "Depends on where you go. On Earth, people might light fireworks. On some of the colonies, they have parades, big meals, dancing, but nothing quite like this." "You should tell me more about Earth," Lithia said. "About your home." Jack hesitated again, searching for the right words. "It's complicated. Earth's beautiful but crowded, diverse. Sometimes it's overwhelming, but it's home. And it's got this energy. People from all walks of life, different cultures, all crammed together, somehow making it work." Lithia's expression was unreadable, but her voice was soft. "It sounds both chaotic and wonderful." "It is," Jack admitted. "At its best, anyway." Aaron returned then, holding two of the crystalline confections. "You have to try these," he said, offering one to Jack. "They're like, well, I don't know what they're like, but they're good." Jack took one, eyeing it warily. "What is it?" "No idea," Aaron said. "But the vendor said it's their specialty." Lithia smiled faintly. "That would be a sapphire sweet. It is made from a fruit that grows only in the high mountains. A rare treat." Jack bit into the delicate confection. It melted on his tongue, a burst of sweetness followed by a cooling sensation. "Not bad," he said. "Different but good." "Told you," Aaron said, grinning. He turned to Lithia. "You know, your festival's pretty amazing. I'll admit, I didn't think it'd be so welcoming." "It is meant to unite," Lithia said. "A reminder of what we share." Jack finished the confection, wiping his fingers on a cloth Aaron handed him. He glanced back at the sky, at the swirling patterns of light. For a moment, the weight of politics and cultural tensions seemed to fade. This wasn't a debate or a negotiation. It was a celebration, a moment of connection. He turned to Lithia. "Thank you for inviting us. It's good to just experience something like this, to see what makes your people who they are." Her gaze lingered on him for a moment, and then she nodded. "I am glad you feel that way, Sergeant." Aaron gave Jack a nudge. "See? I told you this would be worth it. You just have to lighten up a bit." Jack chuckled, shaking his head. "Sure, Briggs. I'll work on that." Chapter 7, Trials of the Heart. The morning light filtered through the high windows of the council chamber as Jack and Aaron entered, their boots clicking against the polished floor. The chamber was quieter than usual, the typical murmurs and debates replaced by a tension that hung heavy in the air. The Illyrian council members were already seated, their expressions ranging from weary to wary. Aaron leaned in slightly as they walked to their usual spot near the wall. Ever get the feeling something's brewing, and we're the last to know? Jack nodded. Every day since we got here. Lithia sat at the head of the council table, her posture as calm and composed as ever. But even from a distance, Jack could see the slight tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers rested more stiffly than usual on the table's edge. Whatever was going on, it wasn't good. The meeting began with routine reports, updates on the exchange program, and discussions of upcoming joint ventures between the Illyrians and humans. But as the hours passed, it became clear that something larger was looming. The usual back and forth of ideas turned into thinly veiled accusations and sharp retorts. It is not a matter of being open-minded, one of the older counselors said, his voice rising slightly. It is about preserving who we are. Introducing so many human advisors at once is reckless. We risk losing our identity. Aaron leaned closer to Jack. Here we go. Jack kept his voice low. Looks like the opposition's getting bolder. Lithia raised a hand, her voice cutting through the brewing argument. We must remember why we embarked on this path. Our worlds coming together was never going to be easy, but the benefits outweigh the challenges. I have no doubts about that. The counselor frowned. And yet you bring an outsider into our midst as a symbol of this union. How can we trust a process built on? Enough, Lithia said firmly. Her gaze swept the room, silencing any further objections. This meeting is adjourned. We will continue tomorrow. The counselors rose, filing out in small groups, their conversations hushed but intense. Jack and Aaron waited until the chamber was nearly empty before approaching Lithia. That was tense, Aaron said, keeping his tone light. Not exactly the warm, collaborative vibe we're used to. Lithia sighed, the regal mask slipping slightly. They fear change. Fear that the way we are blending with your people is moving too quickly. Jack folded his arms. Seems like it's more than just fear. Some of them look like they're ready to do something about it. Lithia's gaze sharpened. You have observed this? Aaron nodded. It's subtle, but it's there. A few of them. Like that elder who keeps bringing up tradition every 5 minutes. They're not just voicing concerns. They're rallying support. She was silent for a moment, her luminous eyes focused on the empty seats before her. Then she turned back to Jack. I need you to help me understand them better. To listen, to observe. If there are those who would seek to harm this alliance, we must know before they act. Jack exchanged a look with Aaron, who raised a brow. Guess that means we're on intel duty. Seems like it, Jack said. He looked back at Lithia. What exactly are you expecting us to find? Anything that could endanger what we are building. I do not believe they would resort to violence, but the thought is not unthinkable. Aaron sighed. And here I thought the biggest challenge would be learning the language. Jack gave him a faint smile. Nothing's ever simple. The rest of the day passed in a blur of quiet observation. Jack and Aaron moved through the palace halls, stopping to listen to snippets of conversation, taking mental notes on which counselors seemed more agitated than usual. It wasn't exactly covert work. Both of them stood out enough to make that impossible, but they kept their questions casual, their presence unobtrusive. At one point, they crossed paths with one of the more vocal counselors, a middle-aged Illyrian named Haryen, who had often argued against the exchange program. He greeted them politely, his expression neutral, but Jack caught the slight hesitation before he spoke. I trust you are finding our customs educational, Haryen said, his tone measured. Very, Jack replied. It's been a real learning experience. Haryen's lips twitched in what might have been a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. I hope that our traditions will not be overwhelmed by this learning process. Aaron stepped in smoothly. I think we can all agree that preserving what makes each culture unique is important. Haryen nodded slowly. Indeed. Good day, gentlemen. As Haryen walked away, Aaron leaned closer. That's our guy. Maybe, Jack said. Let's keep watching. By evening, they reported their findings to Lithia. Most of it was still circumstantial, bits of overheard conversations, subtle gestures that might have meant nothing. But there was enough to suggest that at least a small faction within the council was working against the Empress's plans. Nothing concrete yet, Jack said. But we're starting to see the patterns. Lithia nodded. Good. We must tread carefully. Thank you, both of you. As they left Lithia's chambers, Aaron stretched and let out a long sigh. You know, when we signed up for this mission, I was expecting a lot of things. Guard duty, diplomacy, maybe a little culture shock. But playing political detective? Not what I had in mind. Jack smirked. Yeah, but you're good at it. Aaron gave him a sidelong glance. And you, my friend, are surprisingly patient. Maybe this gig is rubbing off on you. Jack laughed softly. Let's hope it doesn't stick. I'd like to go back to my old, simple life at some point. Aaron grinned. You and me both. Chapter 8, Unity. The Grand Plaza of Illyria's capital city was packed with citizens. A shimmering canopy of golden light created by the Illyrians' technology covered the gathering, casting a warm glow over the enormous crowd. Jack Turner stood near the front, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Aaron Briggs stood at his side, arms folded, scanning the scene with his usual alertness. Quite the turnout, Aaron said under his breath. Looks like everyone wants to see how this ends. Jack nodded. Yeah, no pressure or anything. The crowd hushed as Empress Lithia stepped forward onto the elevated platform at the center of the plaza. She was dressed in robes that gleamed like molten silver, her crystalline crown refracting the light into delicate rainbows. Her voice carried effortlessly across the crowd as she began to speak. My people, she said, her tone calm but resolute. Today we stand on the edge of something new, a partnership that will define our future. For many of you, this journey has been difficult. For others, it has been uncertain. But I ask you now to look beyond the fears and doubts. Look to what we can achieve together. Aaron leaned closer to Jack. You think they're buying it? Hard to tell, Jack replied. But she's good at this. If anyone can bring them around, it's her. Lithia continued, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. Change is never easy. It requires us to trust, to learn, to see past our differences. But in those differences, we find strength. Humanity has brought us new ideas, new perspectives. They have shown us what is possible when we work as one. Jack shifted slightly. He wasn't used to being the focus of such speeches, and though Lithia hadn't named him directly, he could feel the weight of her words. This alliance wasn't just about trade agreements or cultural exchanges. It was about people, about trust. Lithia gestured toward Jack and Aaron, her voice steady. These two have walked among us. They have seen our ways and we have seen theirs. They are not so different from us. They seek what we seek, a future that is brighter than our past. Aaron muttered, well, I guess that's one way to put it. Jack kept his eyes forward, resisting the urge to nudge Aaron for his remark. This was a serious moment, and he didn't want to risk drawing attention away from the Empress's message. A ripple moved through the crowd, quiet murmurs, a shifting. The crowd began to respond. It wasn't a thunderous applause or a collective cheer, but a scattering of nods, a smattering of claps, a sense that the tide was turning, if only slightly. Aaron exhaled, his shoulders relaxing. That's more than I expected. Me too, Jack said. She pulled it off. As the crowd began to disperse, Lithia descended the platform and approached them. Her expression remained composed, but there was a faint glimmer of satisfaction in her eyes. Well done, Jack said. I think you got through to them. It is a beginning, Lithia replied. But beginnings are the most important step. Aaron grinned. You made it look easy, but I'm guessing it wasn't. Indeed, she said. It took more than just words. It took trust. Jack nodded. And that's something we'll need to keep earning. Lithia's gaze lingered on Jack. I believe we will. Together. Aaron cleared his throat, stepping aside slightly. I'll, give you two a moment. Jack glanced at him, but Aaron just smiled and drifted a few paces away. Jack turned back to Lithia, who was studying him with that same calm intensity he'd come to recognize. "I should thank you," she said, "for being willing to walk this path with us." Jack felt a bit awkward under her steady gaze. "I'm just doing what I can. And that," she said softly, "is what makes all the difference." She reached out, lightly touching his arm. A simple gesture that carried more meaning than words. Jack didn't pull away. He met her eyes, understanding in that moment what this alliance really meant. Not just for their two peoples, but for them. The evening sky above the plaza began to darken, the golden canopy fading into the stars. The crowd had mostly dispersed, leaving the plaza quiet. Aaron rejoined them, his usual smirk replaced with a more thoughtful expression. "Well," he said, "looks like we're all in this for the long haul." Jack gave him a faint smile. "Wouldn't have it any other way." Lithia nodded. "Then let us move forward together." And with that, the three of them left the plaza, stepping into the future they would help shape.